Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of Agile Dad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. So without any further ado, let's get started. It's Tuesday. It's a beautiful week, and we're continuing down our path with acronyms. Have you ever been to a meeting before? And at that meeting, you've discovered either A, the right people aren't there, or there's people there and you don't know what they do. I've been in those kind of meetings where you're like, who's that guy and what does he do? Or I know that guy, I've seen him, but what's his job? What does he do? I've been there. Or you've been to a meeting where someone might say, we're going to cover A, B, C, and D. You attend a meeting and the first thing they say is, let's talk about H. And you're like, whoa, where'd that come from, right? I've been there too. The next one has to do with the meeting that's scheduled to last for 10 or 15 minutes and it winds up lasting an hour or 2 hours. I've been to that one too. And then finally, what type of meeting it is and where it's being held. Have you ever had that meeting before where you said, oh, I want it to be an intimate group, so you have a small meeting room in person and 100 people show up? I've had that happen. Or you schedule it and say, this is the time it's going to be most convenient for these groups, but it's time that's completely inconvenient for the most important group. I've done that too. So my question is, how do we stop saying rats? We messed that up. Oh, did I say rats? That's our acronym today, RATS. Anytime someone asks you to schedule a meeting or to follow up on a meeting or to attend a meeting, you need to make sure that you have all your rats lined up. Okay, that sounds kind of crazy, right? So what are rats? So let's talk about rats. The first thing in rats is you need to understand a roster. So rosters for meetings, it sounds kind of, okay, yeah, that sounds very traditional project management. But no, when people send out the invite, you need to make sure that the people's names are there, that you know who should be in attendance, the required attendee, and that you understand what their roles or titles are and how they are involved in a product, project, or service that you're building. Because I can tell you, it's no fun when you go into a meeting and you don't know someone or there's someone really important and you're not addressing them or not paying attention to them. This can cause confusion. It can cause people to break down. You want to make sure you understand that roster pretty implicitly and that the roster is in place, right? So that's the first one. The second one, and probably the most important, is agenda. I always tell my coaches, no agenda, no meeting. If there's not a clear meeting agenda laid out, we shouldn't be doing it. Now, it doesn't need to be to the nth degree of detail. I want to be careful here. So when I say agenda, I'm talking about something that's loosely put together to say, these are the items that we expect to talk about. Now, confession, many times it deviates a little bit or goes off track, and that's fine as long as we stick to the T, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's one of those things where I don't want it to be set in stone. I want it to be free-flowing. But I also want to have a good idea of what the agenda is so that I can be prepared and so that everyone else can be prepared when we walk in a meeting. There's nothing worse than saying, let's have a meeting, going into the meeting and realizing, wow, I don't have that information. Let's reschedule this meeting so I can go back and get the information. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you have a clear agenda. The third one has to do with time boxing. Now, when I talk about time boxing, I have a steadfast rule that I hold with all my coaches that no meeting should ever last more than an hour. If a meeting is taking more than an hour, not only have you lost the attention span of everyone in a meeting, but you probably didn't do enough before the meeting to set a clear agenda, or you don't have the right people in a room. So this is symptomatic. This can show that some other things are going wrong. So I do set pretty strict time boxes, and I try to make those time boxes really short. In theory, what we've learned from coaching is that it's always better to have many short meetings with an actionable deliverable than it is to have a couple of long meetings where everyone walks out and goes, now, what just happened? And I've been to both. So I guess what I'm trying to say is more frequent meetings, much shorter time span, tighter roster, and make sure you have a clear agenda with a goal. And if you have that all outlined, then meetings should be no problem at all, right? So far we've covered the roster. We covered the roster. We covered the roster. We've covered the agenda. We've covered the time box. Let's talk about the S. So the S has to do with the setting or the scheduled place, right? And when I say that, that means scheduling it at the right time so that we can optimize the number of people who could be there. It also means setting in the right room or the right virtual environment. We want to make sure that we're creating an environment that's conducive to people having a fast meeting. If you're in an environment where there's a ton of distractions, oftentimes that hurts and it causes you to not have or to have the meeting extend or to have things go bad. I remember one company that I went and worked for, and in the meeting rooms, they had giant buckets of Legos. And when I stopped and asked them, I said, what are the Legos for? They said, well, the Legos are to help people focus during long meetings. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if you have a bucket of Legos and you got somebody who's focused on building a Lego project, they're not focusing on what you're talking about. I mean, it's almost the whole concept of the fidget spinner, right? You have something to fidget with, or the fidget cube. You have something to fidget with, something to keep you busy because you're checked out already mentally or emotionally from what's going on, which is really interesting. Because I don't think when it was created that people meant for it to be that, but it's true. Now, in no way am I saying having Legos in your meetings bad, because I want to make sure I point that out, because I love meetings with Legos. But I think if you stick to a tight time box and you make sure everyone stays focused, that's okay for someone to fumble around with a few Lego bricks or whatever the case may be. I just don't want it to turn into the main focus in a meeting, right? So RATs, one more time. We have the roster, clear roster of who's attending and what their roles are, and we know that before the meeting starts. Clear agenda. That's high level outline, and it gives us some details so that we can be prepared when we walk into the meeting. A clear, clean time box. It's usually short in length. I'd rather have more frequent meetings with actionable deliverables. And the S, making sure we have everything scheduled correctly and that we are aware of where we're doing it, the setting, to make sure we have the right setting for the meeting. So I hope that this helps you and that you won't go into another meeting going, rats, we did it wrong again. It's a cool acronym, it's fun, and it's just something that you can definitely grab hold of. And I love this conceptually. So I hope this helps, but I do have one more bonus for you since you stuck around this long. I'm going to throw out one more acronym. Why not? Because Wednesday, we know we're going to get something that's covered by Sarah, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. But I want to throw out an acronym since we're going to miss one on Wednesday, and that one's called ELMO. Anytime we're in a meeting and we feel like somebody's droning on about something or drubbing on and just going on and on about something, we can always holler the word ELMO, E-L-M-O. And ELMO is an acronym that means enough, let's move on. It's kind of a bonus, and anyone can say it, not just a scrum master or manager, but it's a great tool to use so that way you can make sure that everyone has that laser focus that's necessary, that no one walks away from a meeting saying rats, and that everyone celebrates ELMO. There you go, why not? So I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you subscribing to the Daily Stand-Up Podcast. We've got lots of new subscribers recently. I really, really appreciate your enthusiasm, and I hope that you'll come back and continue to learn more. As always, we encourage you, if you have an idea that you want to hear as an episode on the Daily Stand-Up Podcast, reach out to us at learnmore@agiledad.com. We would love to hear your ideas. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.